All right, so for all you designers out there who have been yearning for 3D text in Photoshop, it is now here. Now, you could of course create 3D text inside Photoshop CS5 back using Repoussé. The only problem with it was that it would rasterize the text the moment you did that, so you were not able to edit it. So if you created a text layer and you converted it to 3D and you applied a few effects and did some lighting and realized, oh, I misspelled a word, you would have had to go all the way back to the beginning and do it all over again. And this is another one of the frustrating things people found about Photoshop CS5's 3D capabilities, is that they were still limited. It was getting in the right direction, but there were some things that were still limited and made people a little nervous about proceeding further because it didn't have that forgiveness that CS6 now does. Because now we have editable text, editable 3D text here inside of Photoshop CS6 now. So let's just kind of have a look. So I'm actually going to go ahead and create a text layer. So let's go ahead and take an image. I'm just going to type Chicago, since this is what we're looking at. See, skyline of Chicago here. And what I want to do is make this text 3D so it appears as though it's sitting on the surface of the water here in this image. Well, it's going to go over here and let's go ahead and create that 3D. I'm actually going to go ahead and center this in the image first. Let's go do a alignment there, and then let's go in here with that text layer selected. All I need to do is go in the 3D panel here and choose selected layer, 3D extrusion, create, voila. 3D text is just that simple now. Now, we can of course go over here and modify it any way we want. If I want to change the angle of it, I can change my angle of view by moving the current view around. Just click and drag around until I get the kind of positioning I want. If I want it to be a little closer to me and maybe nudge it up a little bit, I can certainly do that. I've got all these different options available to me when I want to position this. And I can notice I'm also using the ground plane grid, even though it's only partially visible because it's black on a dark background image. I'm using it to help my perspective, putting the horizon line in roughly the same horizon area that is in the original image. Now, at this point, you would be able to generate shadows on the ground plane in CS5, as you can see right here. But you wouldn't be able to do reflections. If you indeed wanted a reflection on an object or a text layer like this, you would have had to create a second 3D object and then merge them together in order to have it be reflecting off each other. Well, now, Adobe has added a tremendous feature. If you go and select the text layer itself here in the 3D panel, you of course see all the different surfaces of that text 3D object. But if you go in here, and let's go into the environment section of the 3D panel, and we'll notice we have down here the ground plane properties. And we have reflections. Now by default, the reflection opacity is set to 0, but if I highlight that and increase it to something, say, like, let's start with 30, you can see that the reflection is appeared. It's there very vaguely. To get a better view of it, though, you'll want to do a quick render, and that's real simply just hold down Shift Option Command. It would be Shift Alt Control on Windows, and then press R. And that's going to do a progressive render, and it will start to give you an idea of what you're looking at here. And right away, it already looks like the 3D text is sitting on the surface of that water. It looks pretty good. But obviously, I need to make a couple of changes here. So I'm actually going to reselect that text layer. Actually, no, I'm going to go back into environment, and I want the reflection to be a little bit more pronounced. So I'm actually going to increase that to 50%. Also, that reflection is it's kind of appeared to be sitting on the surface of this water. Now, this water wouldn't necessarily be that smooth and give me that smoother reflection. Now, there's a great feature just below the opacity setting here in the properties panel in the ground plane feature for roughness. Now, this is a very, very touchy feature, so you want to start with a very low number on this. I'm actually going to do 3. And then let's go back to our original image here and just kind of zoom in. And I'm just going to do a quick render. And you'll see right away there's a little bit of roughness added to that reflection, making it a little bit more realistic in the sense that it's sitting on top of that kind of rough water there. Even though it looks a little calm, it's still kind of rough water. And really sells the effect of that being sitting in that environment. And this is another great thing about it, is that you can integrate 3D into your photos that much more with these reflection and shadow properties built into the ground plane. Now, as I mentioned, text is now editable in 3D. If I go and select my text layer item here in the 3D panel again, notice I have down here several properties I can modify with my text. If I go over here and do edit source, it's going to reopen that document with that original text layer. And I can go over here and change it to, let's do night life. Maybe adjust the tracking there a little bit. And when I close this document and save the changes, you can see that it updates that 3D object, complete with all my reflection settings in place, all my shadow settings. And if I do a quick render, I can see I'm getting right where I left off. I didn't have to go all the way back to the beginning to do it, and everything looks really good. Now, if I bring this panel back up, you'll see that we did click on the edit source to modify the image, but we also have a couple of other properties. We can actually change the text color by going in here and let's choose more something of a yellow. You know, if there's something as simple as changing the color of the text, it seems silly to have to go inside the document to do that, and that feature is available right there inside the panel. We also have the ability to modify the different text properties. Things like the font. If I decide I want to try a different font for this, I can do that, and it will update the object. Now, let's go ahead and get this one right here. And you can see it updates the object depending on what font I've chosen. So you can get different looks and experiment even after you've converted it to 3D. And this is another great thing. This is when it goes back to one of those things I was talking about where you're able to experiment and go a bit further, take more risks with this because there's that much more forgiveness with creating 3D and doing all these things. Now, of course, like the object I did in the previous lesson, text is also prone to being, or you can go in here and modify things. Like you can do the twisting of it. You can go and extend the extrusion depth and things like that. I can have it taper down or make it go larger. All these different things to play around with my text. I can bend it around itself, do all kinds of things here. So I'm not just limited to extruding it back and forth. I can twist it and run it around and do all these different things and bend it. All these on a text layer, which again is editable. If I go back in here, I can still go in here and edit the source and do all these different things to my 3D text and continue on. So 3D text is that much easier. It's that much easier to implement. You can institute it right away. The workflow is that much easier. And the fact that it's editable, even after you've gone ahead and applied it, applied lighting, even if I applied textures to this, I could still go back into the edit source and modify the text and even go in the character panel and modify the text properties, even as a 3D object. It's a tremendous new feature, definitely worth experimenting with. As a designer, I would encourage you to certainly experiment with it. Try implementing it into your designs. It's going to make you that much better designer, and it's going to give you that much more creative ideas. In the next lesson, let's take it. So we've talked about extruding and how objects get extruded and how you can modify the extrusions. Let's take it a step further and talk about something called revolving or lathing an object, as it's termed in other 3D applications. And this is the process of basically revolving an object to create rounded shapes, things as simple as glasses and stuff like that. We'll have a closer look at that in the next lesson.